Alright guys, we are back. So in the last video we made the login page. So now we have use of a login page and a register page, register and login. So we are now going to start working with a register, and we're going to actually be able to register a user for the first time. So let's get this cracking. Alright, so the first thing we're going to need is, let me go ahead and close this custom login page. Let's close the home page as well. We're gonna keep the register page open because we're gonna eventually come over here and use this. All right, but the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make use of our use context. Okay, so what is a use context? Or use context is basically a hook that React uses in order to return context value that, you know, through a prop, right, and the provider. So basically you can use a provider function that would create that would absorb value from a bunch of props from different functions, and then it builds a context into it that gets passed through that context function hook, and then you can use it anywhere else by just simply calling. It's kind of like a service. It's kind of like creating services that you can deploy from a service into another file, and then you can bring in this service and use it from there. So I think Angular is, it's just like Angular calls services if you're used to Angular. So this is basically the same thing. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder, and we're going to create that at this root level. We're going to call it context, and then inside of context we're going to create a file, and we're going to call this user auth context text. There you go. Context.js. Yep, that's correct. All right, so in here in our context.js, let's go ahead and import React from React. So we're gonna need that because a lot of the stuff that we're gonna add in here are gonna come from React. But then from in there, we're going to also, with squiggly brackets, we're gonna need the create context and the use context. Right? We're gonna need those two for now. We're gonna need more stuff later, but I want to bring in a couple of stuff at a time. Right? Now we're gonna then also import a couple of stuff from the Firebase authorization that we're going to eventually need. So we're gonna go ahead and from Firebase, wait a minute, there we go, from Firebase /auth. That is not auth, this is auth. So we're gonna need a couple of stuff from Firebase auth here. We're going to need the create, right there, create user with email and password. We're gonna need that one for creating the user. And then we're gonna need the sign in with email and password. We're gonna need that. So these two functions right here are included. They're available to me in the Firebase authorization because I initiated that sign in, login, and password sign in method. This one, because I have this email password sign in method enabled. So this is why I'm able to talk to it with this two right here. All right, and then eventually we're going to need this to sign out. So we're gonna bring the sign out as well. And then the last one that we're going to need is on/off state change, that one, because the state of the authorization is going to change between being signed on or being signed out, right, with logged in or signed out. So so we need to be able to handle it with that right there. All right, and then the last thing that we're going to need is going to import the auth itself from Firebase. And this is not from Firebase, but from our let me show you what I mean. From our Firebase right here, we are bringing this one, our configurations, right? We need to bring in the get auth method that contains the application stuff in there. So we need to bring that in here. So why are we creating this user context or whatever is because we don't want to make sure that we import this on every single file that we're going to need and redo all of this stuff in every single file that we're going to need. So we're creating this helper function, not function, but this helper file here to help us create all the services that we're going to need inside there. All right, so first thing we're going to need to do is we need to create our context. So let's go ahead and call it something like user auth context that we are going to equal to the create context. All right. So now that we have that, good to go. And well, not good to go, it's the gamma stuff. So we're now going to create the context provider basically, and the context provider is the one that is going to absorb all of our services and then put the values of all these services inside of a prop called children, and then this prop that contains all this stuff, this children prop, could be then passed on to a hook that we're going to build, which will make it available everywhere we call it. Right. So in order to call that, we're gonna bring in a function, and we're gonna call this one user auth context provider. There we go. User auth context provider, and in here we're gonna call the children property, the props in there. And we're gonna do that. All right, so we're going to make sure that this is exported. There you go. Cool. Now and then what else we're gonna do in here is then finally not finally, but we need a return. We need a return, and in that return, and that return is in the wrong place. It's in here. Okay, there we go. So we're gonna return a user context. This right here, we're gonna return our user context dot provider, like that, and then inside our provider is where we're going to then pass the children to it. So you see, we're going to collect some children in here. All right, we're going to collect some children in here. We're going to make services, make the services, and collect them as children prop, as the children prop, that are going to then be returned right here through the provider in here. All right, so now for that to work fully the way it should, then outside of that, we're going to create a custom hook that is going to wrap that context and pass it as a single source of truth to all the components later. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to export it, and it's going to be just a function. It's going to be a function, and we're going to call this one use user function, use user auth, yeah, that's better. Use user auth, and that's going to return, I know this is a little confusing, but this is going to return the actual use content hook, this hook, the React hook. And then what are we going to pass in the user content hook? Our content, which is this, the content that we have created in here. So we create it, and then we pass it. Oops, no, I copied too much. There you go. So we create it in here, and then now that it's in here, we're gonna use the create context to create. We're gonna use the create context, and we're gonna put it in here. But all of that stuff through the provider that gets collected in here, and we'll make those in here, gets passed into children through the provider, which then gets attached to the create context and in here, and then it gets passed to the use context in here, and then we can start using it by just calling use user auth everywhere else. It's a little confusing, but trust me, this is the way it works. So yeah, this part, it took me also a little bit of time to figure out what we needed to do. All right, so we are working. We're going to be doing. So this is the pretty much that part is done. Okay, we can just go ahead and save that. I'm not sure if that's going to break or not, my application. I don't think it will, because I'm not really importing it anywhere yet. So I think we're safe so far. But let's go ahead and start building. Let's start building our sign up. Okay. So for our sign up, we're going to need to bring in. First, let's make a first service. Okay, and we're gonna call it sign up. So we're gonna call it a sign up, and that is going to be our function, and then that is going to return the create user with email and password, right? So now what we need to pass in here is we need to collect the email, and we need to collect the password, and we need to pass it in there, email and password. But we're also going to need to pass this authorization in here, because otherwise it's not going to be able to validate whether this email password is even authorized to log in anywhere, because it doesn't have the authorization configuration to know where this email password is going to go be created at. So we need to, so the create user email and password needs to know where it's going to be created, with what email and with what password, and that's how the user will exist in that particular place. All right, so now that const sign up exists, this will create a value. Okay, this is how it starts to make sense. This will create a value, and that value has to be sent somewhere, right? So now is when we go to the provider here that is going to provide that value to our context, and we're gonna call a value prop, which is what it uses, and then inside the value prop we're going to destruct in there our sign up in here. So now this information is inside this provider right here. It's passed into this provider, which is passed as children into our context, and then eventually we'll be living here. So that is available for us to use somewhere else, right? So I can go ahead and save this. Okay, and now we are going to go to our register, and we're gonna go ahead and start building the register application, the register logic. All right, so from our register, in order to register someone in, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our user, our contacts, basically. All right, I'm gonna bring that in there. So okay, cool. And then before we do that, we need to make sure that our email and password can actually retrieve the context, that is not the context, but the value that is inside the field when you type into it. Okay, so let's go ahead and attach here on our text field for email. We're gonna put value. We're gonna call it email, and then we're going to do an Unchange event. This is an event for text fields that basically do something every time you type into it. When you type into it, it's changing. The field itself, it changes inside, and that's what you're basically saying. Whenever the text content, the text field content changes, do what's in here. And then in there, we're going to have an event. Oops, that's wrong. Squiggly brackets, event. And then the event is going to be, this is basically an arrow function. Let me just explain this real quick. This is the same thing as putting an arrow function. This is this basically. It's an arrow function, okay? But because it's all done in line with one single instruction as a logic code in there, a lot of this gets taken out, and I'll show you what it means. So I can put event here, and then here I want to do something. Actually, let me just go back to that in a second. I'll clean this up in a second. We need to make sure that this email gets stored into a state, okay? And then in here, we need to modify that state with whatever it changes, whatever value changes inside there when it's, so in order to create that, we need to go ahead and bring the use state hook. There you go, from React. And we're gonna now come here and we're gonna say const, and then put the brackets for array, and then we're gonna call it email, and then set email, and we're going to equal use state, and we're going to initialize it to nothing. While we at it, we should just already do the password itself too. So we're just going to create password and set password. Set password, set password, also initialize it to nothing. So now that we have those two, so now you see the setter. So we need to now here, we need to set the email, and we're going to set it to the event, this right here. We're gonna set it to the event target value. All right. So it's an arrow function, right? So, but because it's done as an inline, all inline, we can now shorthand this by getting rid of this stuff here, and it'll work just the exact same way. Just like that. All right, cool. So now we can go ahead and copy this and bring it down here to the password, and then just change the value of the password will be whatever is in the password state, and we're gonna change it with the setter for it, set password, so that way we can set the password, set the value of the password that is gonna go in here based on whatever value is typed in here. All right, so now that we have those setters in there, we have to make it do something by clicking on there. So we need an on-click event. So we're gonna create on-click event and a function, and we're gonna call this, what do I have here in my notes? Handle sign up. Yep, handle sign up. Handle sign up. All right, cool. And now we need to create that function. So we're gonna go in here and we're gonna do const handle sign up, arrow function, boom. All right, so we have our basically our structure already done. There's no errors. All right. So what are we doing so far? We created a couple of states, and we're make sure that we're gonna set information in there. And what we're setting is we're setting whatever value gets put inside this email text field, it gets set inside of the email state, which is going to be provided in here in this value. And same thing for the password. And the handle sign up is the one that is going to be, whenever it gets clicked, it's going to do something. Now, what is that something that it's going to do? So now we can come over here to the handle sign up, and we're going to actually make it so that it's an async await. So we put async in there, and then we're gonna need the event, because this button, I would like it to ignore any type of default behavior that it may have. So prevent default. So we're gonna do that. And now inside there, we're going to actually make it so that whenever you hit the sign up button, that it runs my service that I created in my user context in here, this sign up right here that is already being exported in here, right? I wanted to run this. So this is why I brought, let's put this over here. And let's close this Firebase. All right, so this is why I brought it in here, right? So now, in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the sign up from here. So let's start by saying const, and then we're gonna bring in sign up from, no, not from. We're gonna make sure that sign up equals user auth, user auth. All right. So now that sign up is available to us, and we can now bring that in here. Now, however, I do want to make sure that whenever I do that, that is in a try catch, because we're going to be using this as an error, right? So we want to make sure that we catch the error in there. So for that, I'm going to use try catch right here. And that's exactly what it's going to look like. And then in the try catch, that's where we're going to then await, because this is an async, so it has to await for something. So we're going to make an await, and then that await is going to call the sign up, this one right here, right? It's going to call the sign up, which takes 2 arguments, right? Let's go back to that. The sign up takes 2 arguments, email and password. So I'm just going to wrap that in there. And that's gonna go in here. So what am I gonna pass into the arguments? What kind of values I'm gonna pass? The states, the information, the new information that I wanna pass to it. So I wanna pass the email, and I wanna pass the password. Keep in mind, the reason why I'm putting email and password here is not really because that's why I named it here, okay? This says email and password because that's what this is called in Firebase. However, this one here, it says email and password because it's why I called it in the state. If I would have called my state my email and my password, then that's what it had to be here. It had to be my email and my password, like that. This is referring to my state, which contains the information that I'm sending in here. Obviously, this would have to change too because it's talking to the same state. All right, just wanted to make that clear so you know, because every time you have things that are named exactly the same way, a confusion starts to grow as to like, wait, why are you putting email and password here? How do you know what to put in there? Well, that's how you know. It's because there's arguments in here that are supposed to be there, right? We instructed it that it needs to take those 2 arguments in there, but we also need to know that they are the ones that we're setting up. All right, so what we're doing is we are firing this sign up, and we send in the email and password to it. Okay, and now after it does that, I want my user to be able to go to the login page. So in order to do that, I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna bring in the use navigate function, and I'm gonna create a const navigate that is equal to my use navigate hook. Yeah, like that. And I'm going to keep that in here with this one. I like to keep my states separate than my hooks, and my hooks separate and my functions separate. Just what I do. All right, now I can use this navigate right here, and I can say that after this right here, after it's signed up, go ahead and navigate to login. Yeah, to my login. All right, now that's good, but now here, what do I want? What if something happened, right? What if the email was wrong? What if the password was wrong? That's going to throw off errors, which is this right here, right? So I want to make sure that I gotta catch those errors, and I let the user know, hey, what you did didn't work, so fix it, right? So in order to do that, I am going to then create a little message that is going to show here. I want that error to reflect in here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a state and I'm gonna call it error, error message, error message, error, and I'm going to set the error, and then obviously that is going to be initiated as nothing, because you don't have an error to initiate it to, right? You don't know the error until it happens. So because you don't know it until it happens, it's empty for the moment. And then now what we're going to do here is, first off, we're going to set the error to begin with to, that's not what I want. Let's delete that, set error. Okay, that was weird. All right, that's weird. To nothing. What am I doing? Oh, because I made a mistake there. That's why. Now it works. All right, set error. There you go. So first thing I'm doing is I am initializing the first instant of the error as empty. That way, when I fire this automatically will be initialized as nothing, right? There will be nothing inside that error. But then now when I do catch the error, then I want to pass the error in there. So I'm gonna pass in here, I'm gonna pass this error here, just to make it a little bit easier to understand. Let's just call it error, okay? So you don't confuse it with this error. So I'm gonna press error to error. So I'm gonna put there the error, but not the entire error, not the entire error, because that's going to be very verbose. It's gonna have a lot of stuff. I just want the message to be passed in there. Okay, so now that works, then the last thing, I can just close some of the spaces here. Then the last thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this box right here, this red box, only shows when there is an error. So I'm going to put squiggly brackets here because I want this to be a conditional statement. And then I'm going to say, if there is an error, and this is talking about the state, not error. This is talking about the state. So if this state has something in it, if that state has something in it, then I want you to pass it in here. Make sense? All right. All right, so now that we have created that we added that to the provider to the now that we added the provider to the apps, so let's go ahead and test this and make sure that we can actually send a make a user. Let's see if we can actually create a user. So let's go ahead and open this up, and I have this guy here, and let's go ahead and sign it up. All right, and it directed me to the login page, which is what I wanted to do. And it says there is an error. Is there? Let me see. All right, let's see if it even created any user. All right, user is created, but it says, oh, okay. Okay, so there is no error. It's because we're in the login page, and this error right here is still a static message that we haven't got to this page yet. We haven't actually coded this page. So there isn't an error. This is false. This is weird. This is not real. All right. Now let's go back to the sign up again, and let's try to sign up that exact same user again. There I get an error, and this is an actual real error that is being reported by this error message right here, which, by the way, I don't know why I added this. I must have done like a copy paste, select all or something. Anyway. But so here it is. It's telling me email already in use. All right. Let's try to sign on another user, but in this case, let's just do something like this, like not a real email. Sign him up, and then it's another error. The email is invalid. All right. Let's go back to putting a real email, but instead let's just use like 2 digits for the password. And then it says Firebase password should be at least 6 characters. So you see, it's kind of working the way it should be. So that's great. All right, so, and let's just make sure that it didn't create anything. See, didn't create anything. So that's cool. we're gonna leave that guy there because we're gonna use that for the login page, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was working and that the errors are working the way it should. So now what we're going to do is, we're going on the next video, we're gonna go to the login page and we're going to start building this, getting this error to actually show the real stuff. Like for example, if you try to log in without a real user, a user that exists, then it should throw an error. All right, see you guys in the next one.